Welcome to Void Case Files. Before we dive into tonight's investigation, I want to thank the 7% of you who are already subscribed, but that means 93% of you watching right now haven't hit that button yet. Take a second and subscribe. It helps us bring you these stories every single day. And here's a challenge. Let's hit 1,000 subscribers by New Year. We're posting daily videos, so you won't want to miss what's coming next. Tonight, we're heading deep into Yellowstone National Park. 2 million acres of pristine wilderness where the ground itself breathes steam into the cold mountain air, where geysers erupt on schedules older than human memory, where forests stretch endlessly toward horizons that seem to have no end. But there's something else in those woods, something that doesn't appear on any park map, something that's been there long before Yellowstone became America's first national park in 1872. The Native Americans who lived here for thousands of years had a different name for this place. They called it the Burning Mountains. Some tribes believed an evil spirit resided among the geysers. They feared venturing too deep into certain areas. They spoke of people who walked into the forest and never returned, as if the land itself had claimed them. Modern park rangers don't talk about evil spirits. They talk about exposure, wildlife encounters, and the unforgiving terrain. They talk about search and rescue operations and the hundreds of thousands of visitors who pass through safely every year. But they also talk about the ones who don't come back, the ones who vanish so completely that it's as if they never existed at all. This is the story of two such disappearances, separated by exactly 25 years in the same remote corner of Yellowstone. Two people who walked into the wilderness and were erased from existence. No bodies, no evidence, nothing. What connects them is a place the old prospectors named Hellroaring Creek. They said you could hear it from miles away, this creek that roared like the mouth of hell itself. They said strange things happened in that part of the park. People got turned around even when they knew the trail. Compasses spun. Time moved differently. The Park Service says that's just folklore, superstition. But the disappearances, those are real. This is the case of Dennis Eugene Johnson and Daniel Lynn Campbell, and this is the story of what the wilderness takes and never gives back. April 12th, 1966. A Wednesday afternoon so perfect it could have been pulled from a postcard. The sky over Yellowstone was that particular shade of blue you only find at high elevation, so deep and clear it almost hurts to look at. Spring had arrived in the lower elevations, bringing with it the smell of pine sap and wildflowers, though patches of snow still clung stubbornly to the higher peaks like old memories refusing to fade. The Johnson family had driven all the way from Inyakern, California. William Johnson sat at the wheel, his wife Betty beside him, their 4 children squeezed into the back seat with pillows and blankets and the accumulated debris of a long family road trip. This was the vacation they'd been planning for months. Yellowstone, the first national park, the crown jewel of America's wilderness. Dennis Eugene Johnson was 8 years old, sandy brown hair perpetually tousled no matter how many times his mother tried to comb it down. Brown eyes that were always watching, always curious. He wore a dark red shirt that morning, tan Levi's jeans and leather boots that were maybe a size too big because his father said he'd grow into them. Dennis wasn't like other 8-year-olds. He'd been hunting with his father since he was 6. Real hunting, not the kind where dad does everything and the kid just watches. William Johnson believed in teaching his son properly, how to read tracks, how to move quietly through the forest, how to stay calm if you get separated from your group. If you ever get lost, William had told him more times than Dennis could count, you follow a creek downhill, water always leads to people eventually, and you stay calm. Panic is what kills you, not the forest. Dennis had nodded seriously each time, absorbing the lessons like a sponge. The family stopped at Cascade Picnic Area, just a quarter-mile north of Canyon Junction. It was 1:30 in the afternoon. Betty Johnson spread a blanket on one of the wooden picnic tables while William unpacked their lunch from the cooler. Dennis's 3 sisters played nearby, their voices carrying across the open space. 7-year-old Mary, bright and energetic, chased butterflies through the grass. The 2 older girls, Doreen and Diane, were setting up for a game of cards. It was the kind of perfect family moment that gets frozen in photographs. The kind you look back on later and think about how normal everything seemed, how impossible it was to imagine that in just a few minutes everything would shatter. Mary wandered off. It happened so casually that no one could say exactly when. One moment she was there, chasing butterflies. The next moment, when Betty called everyone to lunch, Mary was gone. Just gone, Dennis noticed first. "Mum, where's Mary?" Betty looked around, unconcerned at first. Mary was probably just behind the restroom building or exploring the edge of the forest. "Mary," she called, "lunchtime." No answer. William stood up, shading his eyes against the afternoon sun. He scanned the picnic area. A few other families were scattered at different tables. An elderly couple sat on a bench feeding chipmunks. A young man with a camera was photographing the distant mountains. No Mary. "Mary!" William's voice was louder now, with an edge to it. Still nothing. Dennis tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad, I can help look for her. I'm good at tracking, remember?" William looked down at his son. The boy's face was serious, determined. William made a decision in that moment, a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "All right," he said, "but we stay close. I'll go that way." He pointed toward the restroom facilities and the parking area. "You check near those trees. If you find her, you yell. If you don't find her in 5 minutes, you come right back. Understood?" "Understood," Dennis said. 5 minutes, Dennis. I mean it." "I know, Dad." William watched his son walk toward the tree line, that too big leather boot kicking up small puffs of dust with each step. Then he turned and headed toward the parking area, calling Mary's name. Dennis walked into the forest alone. The temperature dropped immediately under the canopy of pines. The air smelled different here, rich with decay and growth happening simultaneously. He could hear the wind moving through the upper branches, making them creak and whisper. "Mary?" he called out. His voice sounded smaller in the forest, swallowed by the trees. He walked deeper, his eyes scanning the ground for tracks like his father had taught him. There, a small footprint in a patch of soft earth. And there, a broken twig at about the height. Mary would have caught it if she'd walked past. She'd come this way, he was sure of it. Dennis followed the signs deeper into the woods. Just a little further, he thought, just around this next cluster of trees. Meanwhile, back at the picnic area, a middle-aged woman approached Betty Johnson. "Excuse me, are you missing a little girl? Blonde hair, blue dress?" "Yes. Have you seen her?" "She's at the ranger station. I found her wandering near the road and took her there to be safe." Relief flooded through Betty. She grabbed William's arm as he came back from searching the parking area. "They found Mary. She's at the ranger station." William's face broke into a smile. "Thank God. Where's Dennis?" "Dennis." He looked toward the trees where he'd sent his son. "Dennis, we found her. Come on back." The forest remained silent. "He probably just went a bit further than he should have," William said. But there was already a tightness in his voice. "Dennis, your sister's safe. Come on back now." Nothing. William walked quickly to the tree line, Betty right behind him. "Dennis Eugene Johnson, this isn't funny. Get back here right now." The wind moved through the pines. A bird called somewhere in the distance, but there was no sound of a boy crashing back through the underbrush, no voice calling back. "Dennis!" William plunged into the forest, following the same path his son had taken. He could see the small boot prints in the soft earth. He followed them for maybe 50 yards, and then they just stopped. Not like Dennis had changed direction, not like he'd stepped onto harder ground where tracks wouldn't show. They just stopped, as if Dennis had been lifted straight up into the air. "Dennis!" William Johnson's scream echoed through the forest and came back to him empty. By 2 p.m., William Johnson was at the ranger station, his face pale, his hands shaking as he filed a missing person report. Mary sat on a bench, confused about why everyone was so upset. She'd just been exploring. She didn't understand why her father looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past half hour. The ranger on duty, a veteran named Thomas Pritchard, had seen lost children before. Usually they turned up within an hour, scared and crying, but safe. He radioed for additional personnel and organized an immediate search of the Cascade picnic area. By 3 p.m., a dozen rangers were combing the forest, calling Dennis's name. By 4 p.m., they'd found nothing. Not even those boot prints William had followed. When they went back to show the search team where the tracks had ended, there was nothing but undisturbed pine needles and forest floor. By 5 p.m, Ranger Pritchard was requesting helicopters and additional ground support. By nightfall, the search had expanded to involve 50 personnel. This wasn't a lost child anymore. This was something else. The search for Dennis Eugene Johnson would become one of the most intensive in Yellowstone's history. For 3 weeks, teams worked from dawn until dusk, and sometimes through the night. 2 helicopters flew grid patterns over the area, their loudspeakers calling the boy's name across canyons and valleys. "Dennis Johnson, if you can hear us, stay where you are. We're coming to get you. Dennis Johnson, make noise so we can find you." The sound of those loudspeakers echoing off the canyon walls would haunt the search and rescue workers for years. That mechanical voice calling and calling into the wilderness, never getting an answer. Ground teams with binoculars scanned every ridgeline and cliff face within a 100-square-mile radius. They looked for any flash of red from Dennis's shirt, any movement, any sign of a small boy. Bloodhounds from Montana State Prison were brought in, specialized tracking dogs that had found lost people dozens of times before. The handlers gave them Dennis's scent from a pillowcase Betty Johnson had brought from home. The dogs pulled hard at their leashes, eager to work. They led the handlers into the forest, noses to the ground, following something. Then, about 70 yards from where Dennis had been last seen, all 3 dogs stopped simultaneously. They circled, whining, confused. They sniffed the air and the ground, but the scent trail was just gone. Vanished, as if Dennis had simply ceased to exist at that exact spot. The handlers tried again and again. Same result. The dogs would track to that spot and then lose the scent completely. "I've never seen anything like this," one handler told Ranger Pritchard. "It's like the boy just evaporated." The cost of the search reached $14,000 in 1966 dollars. That's equivalent to over $130,000 today. Helicopters burned thousands of gallons of fuel. Volunteers gave up weeks of their lives. The Johnson family spent every penny they had extending their stay, refusing to leave. Betty Johnson walked the forest herself every day, calling her son's name until her voice was raw. William barely slept, convinced that if he just looked in the right place, thought of the right spot, he'd find Dennis sitting under a tree, waiting to be rescued. Doreen and Diane grew quieter with each passing day, watching their parents crumble. Mary stopped talking altogether. She'd wander off, and Dennis had gone to find her. This was her fault, her 7-year-old brain told her. She'd killed her brother. 3 weeks. 21 days of searching, hundreds of man-hours, thousands of acres covered. Not a trace, not a scrap of fabric from his red shirt, not a leather boot, not a single brown hair caught on a branch. Nothing. Lee Whittlesey, who would later become Yellowstone's official historian, documented the search in meticulous detail. He interviewed the searchers, the family, the rangers. Years later, he would write that Dennis's older brother told him the family believed the Park Service had done absolutely everything possible. But that didn't change the outcome. The wilderness had taken an 8-year-old boy and left nothing behind. The official search was called off in early May. The Johnson family stayed another week, unable to accept it. Then another week. Finally, in mid-May, they packed up their car and drove back to California. The drive back was silent. No one spoke. Mary stared out the window. Betty cried quietly, her face turned away so the children wouldn't see. William gripped the steering wheel and stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. They left behind a son, a brother, a piece of their family. Somewhere in those 2 million acres, Dennis was still out there. Maybe his bones lay at the bottom of some hidden ravine. Maybe his red shirt hung from a branch deep in the forest. Maybe his leather boots sat at the edge of a creek, waiting for someone to find them. Or maybe not. Years passed. William and Betty Johnson tried to move on, tried to heal, but the wound never closed. How could it? There had been no funeral, no grave to visit, no closure of any kind. Dennis was just gone, suspended in permanent uncertainty. In desperation, they hired a psychic. The woman claimed to have visions. She said she could see Dennis near water. A shallow ditch, she said, or maybe a canyon. She described the location in vague terms that could have applied to 100 different places in Yellowstone. Search teams checked the areas she described. They found nothing. The psychic took their money and moved on to the next grieving family. William Johnson died in 1989, 23 years after his son disappeared. The last thing he said to his remaining children was that he'd see Dennis soon, wherever he was. Betty Johnson followed in 1993. On her deathbed, she asked if anyone had ever found her boy. They hadn't. Dennis Eugene Johnson has been missing for 58 years. His case remains open. Those leather boots, which should have survived decades in the wilderness, have never been found. The red shirt that should have been visible from the air has never been spotted. It's as if Dennis never existed at all. As if the forest reached out and pulled him into some place between spaces, somewhere that's not quite here and not quite gone. But the forest wasn't done. 25 years after Dennis vanished, it would take someone else from almost the exact same area, and this time the person who disappeared was no child. This time, it took a grown man who knew the wilderness better than most people know their own backyards. April 4th, 1991. Thursday morning. 25 years, almost to the day, after Dennis Johnson walked into the trees and never came out. Daniel Lynn Campbell stood at the Hellroaring Creek trailhead, breathing in the cold morning air. At 42 years old, Daniel was built like the logger he was, solid and strong, with the kind of weathered face you get from spending most of your life outdoors. His hands were calloused from handling chainsaws and pole cutters. His boots were worn but well maintained. Beside him, his girlfriend Tracy leaned against her truck, arms crossed, not quite meeting his eyes. "You sure about this, Dan?" she asked for the third time that morning. "I'm sure," he said, adjusting the straps on his light pack. 4 days, in and out, easy money. Tracy looked toward the trailhead where the path disappeared into the forest. "It's illegal, you know. Collecting antlers in the park." "I know. And you're going anyway." Daniel turned to face her, his expression softening. "Tracy, I got bills stacked up on the kitchen table that I can't pay. The settlement from that lawsuit is coming through soon, but soon doesn't help me right now. Elk sheds go for $15, $20 a pound right now. Good quality, maybe more. I can clear a couple $1,000s in 4 days if I'm smart about it. And if you get caught?" "I won't get caught. I know these mountains, Trace. I've been working in forests like this since I was 16. This isn't some tourist stumbling around with a map. I know what I'm doing." Tracy wanted to argue more, but she could see it was pointless. When Daniel made up his mind, that was it. "Just be careful, okay? And be at Jardine on the 8th. I'm not waiting around all day like last time." Daniel grinned. "Last time I was early and you were late." "That is not how I remember it." A soft whine interrupted them. Freckles, Daniel's Australian Shepherd mix, was sitting patiently by the trailhead, but her whole body was tense with anticipation. The dog was just over a year old, energetic and loyal. She loved the wilderness almost as much as Daniel did. "You ready, girl?" Daniel called. Freckles barked once sharply. "I'll take that as a yes." Daniel turned back to Tracy and pulled her into a quick hug. 4 days. Then we'll take that money and go somewhere nice. Maybe the coast. You've been wanting to see the ocean again. 4 days, Tracy repeated. April 8th, Jardine. April 8th. I'll be there. Daniel shouldered his pack, whistled for Freckles, and headed toward the trail. Tracy watched him go, watched the way he moved with confidence through the forest, like he belonged there. Freckles trotted beside him, occasionally darting ahead to investigate some interesting smell before circling back. The last thing Tracy saw before they disappeared around a bend in the trail was Freckles looking back at her, those intelligent dog eyes seeming to hold some kind of message Tracy couldn't quite read. Then they were gone, swallowed by the trees. The Hellroaring Creek Trail is not for beginners. It starts with a descent of 600 feet over just 1 mile, a series of steep switchbacks that drop from the trailhead down to the Yellowstone River. Your knees ache by the time you reach the bottom. Your thighs burn on the way back up. But Daniel had done harder trails. This was nothing. The morning was perfect for hiking. Clear sky, temperature in the low 50s, perfect visibility. As he descended the switchbacks, he could see for miles. Hellroaring Mountain rose to the north, a prominent conical peak of granite. Most of Yellowstone's granite had been buried under volcanic debris from the supervolcano that slept beneath the park. But Hellroaring Mountain stood exposed, ancient stone thrust up through newer rock. Daniel crossed the suspension bridge over the Yellowstone River, the structure swaying slightly under his weight. Below, the water rushed past, grey-green and freezing cold even in April. Freckles didn't like the bridge. She crouched low and hurried across, relieved when her paws hit solid ground again. Beyond the bridge, the trail opened onto a sagebrush plateau. The vegetation changed here, from dense pine forest to open scrubland dotted with scattered trees. This was prime elk habitat. During the spring shed season, you could find antlers lying in the grass where the elk had dropped them, the bones still white and clean. Daniel's plan was to follow Hellroaring Creek north, past the park boundary into the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness. Technically, once he crossed into national forest land, collecting sheds was legal. But he'd start looking before then. The park rangers couldn't be everywhere at once. He hiked for several hours, covering ground steadily. Freckles ranged ahead, her nose working constantly. Around midday, he stopped at a creek to filter water and eat some jerky. The sun was high and warm. Everything was going perfectly. By late afternoon, Daniel had found his first shed. A nice bull elk antler, 5 points, the bone heavy and solid in his hands. He tied it to his pack and kept moving. Then another, then 2 more. This was going to be a good trip. As evening approached, he found a flat spot near the creek to make camp. No tent, just a bedroll and a tarp in case it rained. Daniel was old school. He built a small fire, cooked some food, and sat with Freckles leaning against his leg as the sun went down. The forest grew quiet as darkness fell. That particular kind of quiet you only get deep in the wilderness, where human sounds don't reach. Just the creek, the wind in the trees, and the occasional call of a bird settling in for the night. Daniel fell asleep easily, Freckles curled up beside him. He didn't know that 20 miles away, storm clouds were building. He didn't know that the weather forecast he'd checked 3 days ago was about to become catastrophically wrong. He didn't know that he had less than 24 hours left. April 5th, Friday. Daniel woke to a changed world. The temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees overnight. The sky was the color of old iron, heavy clouds pressing down on the mountains. The wind had picked up, carrying with it the smell of incoming snow. "Shit," Daniel muttered, sitting up in his bedroll. This wasn't in the forecast. This wasn't supposed to happen. Freckles whined, pressing close to him. Daniel checked his compass, oriented himself, and made a decision. He was already a day into the backcountry. Going back now meant giving up on the whole trip. But if he pushed north today, got over the ridge, and into the next valley, he could shelter there and wait out whatever storm was coming, then continue on to Jardine as planned. He'd been through mountain weather before. This would be fine. By mid-morning, the first snowflakes were falling, big fat flakes that stuck to everything they touched. Within an hour, the ground was white. Within 2 hours, Daniel was hiking through a genuine blizzard. Visibility dropped to maybe 30 feet. The trail became harder to follow under the accumulating snow. Daniel kept his compass out, checking it constantly to maintain his bearing. North. Just keep going north. Freckles stayed close now, no more ranging ahead. The dog's coat was thick with snow, her breath coming in visible puffs. The temperature continued to drop. Daniel's fingers were numb inside his gloves. The antlers tied to his pack seemed to gain weight with every step, but he refused to abandon them. Not after coming this far. He should have turned back. Later, investigators would say that was his fatal mistake. He should have turned back Friday morning when the storm started. But Daniel Lynn Campbell was stubborn. He'd committed to this trip, and he was going to see it through. The snow fell heavier. The wind picked up, driving the flakes horizontal. Daniel could barely see Freckles walking right beside him. The world had become nothing but white and grey, the trees appearing suddenly out of the storm like ghosts. Somewhere in that whiteout, Daniel got turned around. He thought he was heading north. His compass said north. But compasses can be deceived in mountains rich with iron ore and magnetic rock. The needle that should have pointed true north was pointing somewhere else entirely. Daniel walked walked deeper into the wilderness, Freckles following faithfully beside him. By nightfall, he was hopelessly lost. April 8th, 1991. Monday afternoon, Tracy Erb sat in her truck at Jardine, Montana, watching the parking area for any sign of Daniel's approach. She'd arrived early, around noon, figuring he might show up ahead of schedule if the hiking was good. By 2 p.m., she was annoyed. Late again, typical Daniel. By 4 p.m., she was worried. By 6 p.m., she was terrified. She drove to the nearest ranger station and reported Daniel Lynn Campbell overdue and missing. The rangers asked the standard questions. When did he leave? What was his planned route? What was he wearing? Did he have supplies? Tracy answered as best she could, but there were things she couldn't tell them, like that Daniel was in the park illegally, hunting for elk sheds. She kept that part vague, said he was just hiking, camping, enjoying the backcountry. The rangers exchanged looks. A missing hiker. Bad weather had hit the area hard over the past few days. This could be serious. They mobilized immediately, but they had a problem, a big problem. The snowstorm that had hit on April 5th had dumped over 2 feet of snow on the higher elevations. The backcountry was buried, trails were impassable. Even with helicopters, visibility was poor and conditions were dangerous. Still, they tried. Search and rescue teams deployed into the Hellroaring Creek area. They fought through snowdrifts and whiteout conditions. Helicopters flew when the weather permitted, which wasn't often. Ground teams on snowshoes covered what terrain they could. They called Daniel's name until their voices were raw. They found nothing. No tracks. The snow had covered everything. No camping evidence. If Daniel had made a fire, the snow had buried the ashes. No gear, no abandoned pack, no sign that Daniel Lynn Campbell had ever been there at all. Freckles was gone too, a loyal Australian shepherd who would never have left her owner's side. If Daniel had died from exposure or injury, Freckles should have been nearby, guarding the body or trying to lead rescuers back. Dogs do that. It's instinct, but there was no dog. The searches continued for weeks. As the snow melted and the trails became passable again, teams combed every inch of the Hellroaring Creek drainage. They searched the river, they searched the ravines, they searched places so remote that the rescuers themselves needed rescue support. Paul Miller, the National Park Service investigator leading the search, told reporters something that would become the unofficial motto of the case. It's a big, wild place with a lot of niches and crannies. A guy can walk within 10 feet of someone and not find them. But it was more than that. This wasn't just rough terrain making it hard to find a body. This was a complete absence of evidence. Daniel had vanished as thoroughly as Dennis Johnson had 25 years earlier. Theories developed quickly. Maybe Daniel got lost in the storm and died from hypothermia. Possible. But searchers found no body, and bodies don't just disappear, even in heavy snow. Maybe he fell through ice into a creek or river and was swept away. Possible, but the Yellowstone River and Hellroaring Creek were both searched extensively downstream. Nothing. Maybe a grizzly bear killed him. Definitely possible. This was prime grizzly habitat. But bears don't eat everything. They leave bones, clothing, gear. Searchers found none of that. Maybe he intentionally disappeared. This theory gained traction when authorities learned about Daniel's financial troubles. He owed money. He had debts. Maybe he'd staged his own death and started over somewhere else. But Daniel's brothers, Rod, Bill, and Jerry Campbell, immediately shot that theory down. They pointed out something crucial that the authorities had missed. Daniel was about to receive a substantial legal settlement. He'd been involved in a lawsuit, and it was close to resolution. The payout would have solved all his financial problems. Why would he disappear right before coming into money? It made no sense. The brothers believed something else had happened to their brother, and they believed they knew what. Murder. The underground elk shed hunting market wasn't just lucrative, it was territorial, violent. Collectors had their areas, their routes, their secret spots. Outsiders weren't welcome. Disputes over prime hunting grounds could turn deadly. Maybe Daniel had encountered other poachers in the backcountry. Maybe there'd been a confrontation. Maybe someone had killed him and hidden the body. It would explain the complete lack of evidence. A planned murder, a concealed burial, maybe even removing the body from the park entirely. The FBI looked into it. They questioned known shed hunters. They investigated Daniel's associates. They chased leads that went nowhere. No suspects emerged, no witnesses came forward, no evidence of foul play was found. Park County Sheriff Charlie Johnson was blunt in his assessment. "We're not doing much at this point because we've got nothing to go on. If we get new leads, that'll change. But right now, we've got nothing." The investigation stalled. Weeks became months. Months became years. Tracy Erb tried to move on, but how do you move on from that? She'd been the last person to see Daniel alive. She'd watched him walk into the forest with Freckles at his side. Somewhere in her mind, she kept seeing that moment on loop. Daniel adjusting his pack. Freckles looking back at her, the forest swallowing them both. Could she have stopped him? Should she have insisted he not go? The what-ifs ate at her. Daniel's brothers couldn't let it go either. The uncertainty was destroying them. No body meant no funeral. No funeral meant no closure. They were trapped in limbo, not knowing if Daniel was dead, where he'd died, or how. The not knowing became a weight they carried every day. Depression set in, anxiety, obsessive thoughts about what might have happened, inability to concentrate on work or family or anything else. In February 2000, 9 years after Daniel disappeared, the Campbell brothers had had enough. They filed a lawsuit against former Park County Sheriff Charlie Johnson, alleging he'd failed to properly investigate their brother's disappearance. The lawsuit claimed Johnson had breached his legal duty to properly and competently conduct the investigation. They sought $100,000 each for the emotional distress they'd suffered, the depression, the anxiety, the insomnia, the inability to move forward with their lives. Their attorney, Penelope Strong, spoke to the press. If this thing had been properly handled, the family could have had some timely closure. They can't even hold a memorial service because of the uncertainty. That's not right. That's not justice. The lawsuit made headlines locally. Sheriff Johnson, who had been defeated in the 1998 election amid unrelated scandals, defended his department's actions. He maintained they'd done everything possible with the resources and information available. The case dragged through the courts. Legal briefs were filed. Depositions were taken. But in the end, it didn't matter. The lawsuit didn't bring Daniel home. It didn't provide answers. It just created more pain, more legal fees, more years of uncertainty. No public settlement was ever recorded. The case was quietly resolved and the details remained sealed. Daniel Lynn Campbell has been missing for 33 years. His case remains open. The National Park Service still lists him as a missing person. If you call the Sweetgrass County Sheriff's Department, they'll tell you the investigation is ongoing. But ongoing doesn't mean active. It just means they haven't officially given up. Somewhere in that vast wilderness, Daniel's remains might lie at the bottom of a ravine. His bones might be scattered across a hillside. His pack might be buried under decades of fallen leaves and pine needles. Or maybe not. Maybe the forest took him the same way it took Dennis Johnson. Completely. Thoroughly. Leaving nothing behind but questions and grief. 2 disappearances, 25 years apart. Same area of Yellowstone. Same complete absence of evidence. Dennis Eugene Johnson, 8 years old. Vanished April 12th, 1966, near Canyon Junction. Last seen walking into the forest to find his sister. Daniel Lynn Campbell, 42 years old. Vanished April 4th, 1991 in the Hellroaring Creek area. Last seen hiking into the back country with his dog. 20 miles separates their disappearance sites. 25 years separates their disappearance dates. But something connects them beyond geography and time. Both areas involve steep, densely forested terrain cut through with creek systems. Both are remote backcountry where cell phones don't work and help is hours or days away. Both are grizzly bear habitat, wild and unforgiving. But here's what makes these cases different from typical wilderness disappearances. In most missing person cases in national parks, searchers find something. A piece of clothing, a backpack, boot prints, some evidence that the person was there. Dennis left nothing. Not his red shirt, not his leather boots, not a single hair or footprint. Daniel left nothing. Not his camping gear, not his dog, not even the elk antlers he'd collected. It's as if they were plucked from existence. The differences between them make it even stranger. Dennis was a child. Smart for his age, yes. Experienced for his age, yes. But still a child. You could understand a child getting lost, getting disoriented, making a fatal mistake. Daniel was a professional logger with decades of wilderness experience. He'd worked in forests his entire adult life. He knew how to navigate. He knew how to survive. Dennis disappeared on a clear, perfect spring afternoon. Visibility was excellent. The weather was ideal. Daniel disappeared during a snowstorm. Visibility was terrible, the weather was dangerous, yet both vanished equally completely. And then there's Freckles. Australian Shepherds are among the most loyal dog breeds in existence. They bond intensely with their owners. They don't abandon them. If Daniel had died from hypothermia, Freckles would have stayed with the body. If Daniel had fallen and been injured, Freckles would have barked, drawn attention, led rescuers back. If Daniel had been killed by a bear, Freckles would have fled and likely been found by searchers, traumatized but alive. Instead, Freckles disappeared too, vanished as completely as her owner. Over 100 people searched for Daniel. Helicopters with thermal imaging flew over the area. Search dogs trained to find human remains covered the terrain. Experienced trackers examined every inch of ground. They found nothing. The same thing happened with Dennis. 50 people for 3 weeks, helicopters with loudspeakers, bloodhounds from the state prison, a 100 square mile search radius, nothing. Let's talk about what the wilderness can do. Yellowstone is grizzly country. A healthy adult male grizzly can weigh 600 pounds and has a bite force of over 1,200 pounds per square inch. They can kill a human in seconds. They can drag a full-grown elk carcass for miles. But even grizzlies leave evidence. They don't eat everything. Bones remain, clothing remains, gear remains. Grizzlies don't clean up a kill site. They feed and leave, coming back later if the carcass is large enough. Searchers found no bear sign at either disappearance site. No scat. No tracks. No disturbed vegetation indicating a bear had been feeding in the area. The terrain is dangerous. Yellowstone has countless ravines, canyons, and hidden drop-offs. People can fall and become inaccessible. The winter snow can bury a body for months or years, but helicopters searched from above. Thermal imaging can detect heat signatures through vegetation. As the seasons changed and snow melted, anything buried should have become visible again. The creeks and rivers are cold and fast-moving. Someone who fell in could be swept away and drowned. Bodies can travel miles downstream before snagging on debris. But both the Yellowstone River and Hellroaring Creek were searched extensively. Teams checked every snag, every logjam, every place a body might catch. They searched miles downstream. Nothing. So what happened? The official explanation is that Yellowstone is vast and unforgiving. 2 million acres of wilderness. Terrain so rough that searchers can pass within feet of someone and miss them. Weather that can kill in hours. Wildlife that can eliminate evidence. Paul Miller's quote echoes, "A guy can walk within 10 feet of someone and not find them." But that doesn't explain the complete absence of evidence. Not even a scrap of fabric. Not even a bone. Not even a boot that should have survived decades in the forest. Dennis and Daniel aren't alone. They're 2 of at least 6 people who have vanished in Yellowstone without leaving a trace. Bruce Parker Pike, 47 years old, disappeared August 2nd, 2006. His vehicle was found abandoned at Indian Creek Campground. Bruce was gone. Searchers found no sign of him. No tracks leading away from the vehicle. No camping gear. No explanation. Stuart Isaac, 48 years old, disappeared September 24th, 2010. His black Lexus was found at Craig Pass, 8 miles east of Old Faithful. Stuart had driven 32 hours from Maryland to visit Yellowstone. His car was found in an area with no hiking trails. Stuart was gone. Searchers found nothing. Kim Crumbo disappeared September 19th, 2021. An experienced backcountry ranger and wilderness expert. He knew Yellowstone better than almost anyone. He vanished during what should have been a routine solo trip. Searchers found no trace. Luke Sandberg disappeared sometime in the 2000s. Details are sparse because his case received little publicity, but the result was the same. No body, no evidence, nothing. 6 people across 5 decades, all in the same general region of Yellowstone, All vanished completely. And these are just the cases we know about. Yellowstone doesn't maintain an official list of missing persons. When journalists request information, the Park Service refers them to the National Park Service's Cold Case Database. That database lists 25 missing person cases total for all national parks combined. Not just Yellowstone, all of them. David Paulides, a former police detective, has spent years investigating disappearances in national parks. His Missing 411 series documents case after case of people who vanished under mysterious circumstances. He estimates over 1,200 people have disappeared in national parks and wilderness areas across North America. The government has never released a comprehensive list. They claim they don't track the data centrally. Each park keeps its own records. There's no unified database. Paulides believes that's intentional. He thinks the Park Service doesn't want the public to know how many people vanish in these places. It would hurt tourism. It would raise questions they can't answer. Between 2018 and 2020, Yellowstone alone reported 371 search and rescue incidents. That's the fourth highest among all national parks. Most people who go missing are found. They wander off trail, get disoriented, run out of water, and are located within 24 to 48 hours. Search teams work tirelessly. Park rangers, volunteers, helicopter pilots, search dog handlers, they do everything humanly possible. But some people aren't found. Some people vanish so completely it's as if they were never there at all. The Native Americans who lived in this region for thousands of years before white settlers arrived had stories about Yellowstone. They spoke of spirits in the steam vents. They spoke of sacred places where humans shouldn't go. They spoke of people who walked into certain areas and never returned. The Crow, Blackfeet, Bannock, and Shoshone tribes all considered parts of Yellowstone to be spiritually dangerous. Some areas were avoided entirely. Medicine men warned against venturing too deep into the burning mountains. Modern science dismisses these stories as superstition. Myth, folklore designed to explain natural phenomena that ancient people didn't understand. But the disappearances aren't folklore. They're documented, investigated, real. Dennis Eugene Johnson walked into the forest on April 12, 1966, to find his sister. His father sent him. His father told him to check near the trees and come back in 5 minutes. Dennis never came back. 50 people searched for 3 weeks. Helicopters flew overhead. Bloodhounds tracked his scent to a spot 70 yards into the forest and then lost it, as if Dennis had evaporated. No red shirt, no leather boots, no 8-year-old boy. The forest took him and left his family with 58 years of unanswered questions. Daniel Lynn Campbell walked into the backcountry on April 4, 1991, to collect elk sheds and make some money. He was experienced. He was prepared. He had his loyal dog with him. A snowstorm hit. Daniel got lost, or Daniel got hurt, or Daniel encountered someone in those woods who meant him harm. No one knows. Over 100 people searched. Helicopters with thermal imaging, search dogs, expert trackers. They found nothing. Not Daniel, not Freckles, not even the antlers he'd collected. The forest took him and left his brothers with 33 years of uncertainty and pain. William and Betty Johnson died without ever knowing what happened to their son. They went to their graves with that question burning in their hearts. Where is Dennis? What happened to him? Did he suffer? Was he afraid? Did he call for us? Rod, Bill, and Jerry Campbell live with the same questions about their brother. Where is Daniel? How did he die? Is he even dead? Could he somehow still be alive somewhere? Tracy Erb lives with the memory of watching Daniel walk into the forest. She was the last person to see him. That image is burned into her mind. Daniel adjusting his pack. Freckles looking back. The trees swallowing them both. These aren't statistics. These aren't cold cases filed away in dusty cabinets. These are people. Real people with families who loved them. Mothers who cooked their favorite meals. Fathers who taught them to fish. Brothers who shared bedrooms and secrets. Partners who planned futures together. All of them gone. All of them taken by wilderness that gave nothing back. The Hellroaring Creek Trail is still there. You can hike it today. The suspension bridge still spans the Yellowstone River, swaying in the wind. The switchback still climbs 600 feet from the river to the trailhead. The sagebrush plateau still stretches toward Hellroaring Mountain. Thousands of people hike that trail every year. Most of them never know that 2 people vanished there. Most of them never know about Dennis or Daniel or the others who were swallowed by these woods. They take photos of the bridge. They admire the view. They pack out their trash and return to their cars and drive away, satisfied with a good day's hike. And they should. Yellowstone is beautiful. It's worth visiting. It's worth experiencing. But it's also worth respecting. The wilderness doesn't care about your experience level. It doesn't care that you've hiked 100 trails or survived a dozen camping trips. It doesn't care that you're prepared or that you told people where you'd be. Sometimes it takes people anyway. The Park Service does everything it can. They post safety warnings. They require permits for backcountry camping. They staff ranger stations and maintain emergency communication systems. But in 2 million acres of wilderness, there are places where help can't reach you in time. Places where a mistake becomes fatal in minutes. Places where the line between a beautiful hike and a permanent disappearance is impossibly thin. If you visit Yellowstone, be smart. Tell someone your exact route and when you'll return. Carry more supplies than you think you'll need. Bring bear spray and keep it accessible. Stay on marked trails, hike in groups, check weather forecasts, and be prepared to change plans if conditions deteriorate. Do all of that, and you'll probably be fine. Probably. But somewhere in those forests, in places searchers haven't found yet, or maybe can't find at all, answers wait. Maybe Dennis's leather boots lie at the bottom of a ravine, preserved by the cold, waiting for some future hiker to stumble across them. Maybe Daniel's pack hangs from a tree branch in some remote canyon, the fabric faded but still intact. Maybe their bones rest in hidden places, slowly being reclaimed by the earth. Or maybe the forest took them somewhere else entirely. Somewhere we don't have words for. Somewhere between the trees and the sky and the steam rising from the geysers. The Native Americans believed in spirits. They believed the land was alive. They believed certain places had power. Maybe they were right. Dennis Eugene Johnson has been missing for 58 years. Daniel Lynn Campbell has been missing for 33 years. Their cases remain open. Somewhere in Yellowstone, the forest knows what happened to them, but the forest isn't telling. This has been Void Case Files. We're posting daily videos. Help us hit 1,000 subscribers by New Year. Tomorrow's episode covers another case that will make you question everything you think you know about wilderness disappearances. Subscribe now, you won't want to miss it.